Hello and welcome back to The Vacant Light. Today I'm back with another video review. I'm covering Xdeo's debut album called Romulus. This is actually an album I'm surprised that nobody else on YouTube has already covered in a review, as it's not really that obscure, though it is very enjoyable. If you're not familiar with Xdeo, the band is essentially a side project from Cataclysm, containing almost all of the same members as Cataclysm. The band in particular plays a style of metal that is both melodic and uses some symphonic elements in the music in particular. Now, I'm not really that familiar with Cataclysm's music, so I will be talking about this album sort of on its own and not in relation to any other particular music in general or specifically. So without further delay, let's talk about the music on this release. The vocal work is fairly unique in what it does. The vocals do sort of have a death metal style to them, though not in the traditional sense. What you'll get a lot is a lot of yells, sort of mid-pitched yells on the record, and going anywhere from there to more high-pitched, almost screams, not quite shrieks in the style of, say, black metal or anything like that, but the vocals are very well diversified between those two primary styles, and sort of everything in between those 2 points. In addition to that, I'd like to say that the lyrics on this album, which is actually a concept album about Caesar and Rome and warfare and battle and so on, the lyrics are actually pretty recognizable, and they do add quite a lot to the listening experience, in my opinion. I'm traditionally not a big lyrics person, but I find that when it fits in with the concept of an album and adds to that atmosphere, then it's great to have really well-written lyrics, which is definitely the case on this album. With that said, though, I'd like to say that the vocals are not maybe at the forefront of the music, as you find vocals maybe with most metal bands these days. There are quite a lot of sections with no vocals, and in addition to the regular styles of vocals on here, there are some moments with more spoken parts to them, such as on the track Cry Havoc. Now, that song in particular, sort of going through my history with this album, I actually heard that song in a popular music store and sort of bought the album immediately. This was an album that really did impress me right at the beginning. Moving on to the guitar work, there's definitely a distinction between the lead and the rhythm guitar parts on this album, and they're both very important. In addition, I'd like to say that the rhythm guitar is maybe a little bit more prominent than on other traditional metal releases, and without the rhythm guitar on this album, it would be much less of a listen, in my opinion. I feel that they utilize 2 guitar tracks quite well. And actually, they do the same thing with vocals. You will hear a reasonable amount of vocal double tracking on the release. So vocals and guitars both use multiple tracks quite well. The lead guitar is not highly distorted, but there's not enough of a distorted tinge to it to sort of cut through the other instruments when that's needed in the actual production and so on. The rhythm guitar has some pretty powerful chugging riffs that add to the thick, low-end sound that you get from them when you combine it with the bass playing and the drumming. And I feel there's a lot of distinctness between the rhythm and lead guitar parts. The songs are, for the most part, pretty melodic, and you'll find some more progressive and atmospheric styles thrown in there, and I feel the guitars adapt quite well to those different styles. In particular, I found the first few tracks off the album to be more melodic and catchy, that sort of lead you more into the progressive and more experimental and aggressive songs toward the second half of the album, which is quite an intelligent thing to do, get the audience interested and then have them go through the more experimental stuff sort of in the second half. The bass playing for the most part blends in with the rhythm guitar sound, and it does add a nice rich thickness to the album and the production. You won't find a lot of distinct bass playing parts, which is sort of unfortunate, but at the same time, I really think that if you had taken that bass away from doubling that rhythm guitar part, it wouldn't have the same impact on the music. There's 1 or 2 spots where you can hear the bass playing pretty distinctly, and it has a growly and metallic tone to it, so it's a fairly aggressive bass tone when you do hear it, though that's not very often. The drumming is technical as much as it needs to be, if you can understand what I'm saying with that. I feel that the drumming adapts quite well to the different tones the different tempos on various tracks on this album, I never feel like it tries to be overly technical, which is sort of similar with the other instruments on the album. I don't feel that anything on this album tries to be overly technical just for the sake of being technical. All of the instruments flow well together and are used in various combinations, and I feel that the drumming accents the different ideas and styles. For example, in slower moments using more of the cymbal and hi-hat work, whereas in the more aggressive moments focusing more on the bass and snare drumming. In addition to that, I feel that the drumming is produced very distinctly. There's quite a sharp production tone to it, and I feel that the drummer is very tight in his drumming that allows that production tone to come through very well to the listener. You're not going to get a whole lot of extremely aggressive parts on this album, but there's enough diversity in the tempo to keep it interesting, and the drumming never feels sloppy or all over the place in any way. Finally, the keyboard effects on this album are quite well done, and I feel that they're very much in tune with the styles and concepts on the album. In some parts, I feel that the keyboards help accent the lead parts with the guitar, or even the rhythm guitar on its own sometimes. And on top of that, I feel that sometimes the band likes to build a little bit of a counter melody with the keyboard part to contrast against what the guitars are doing. Lastly, there are a few moments where the keyboards and maybe a little bit of drumming are the forefront of the music. For example, on the track Cry Havoc, sort of in the interlude with the spoken vocals, the keyboards are really prominent there, and without them the song would not be the same. So I'd like to commend the band on the subtlety of the keyboard playing in particular on this album, and it adds a lot to that atmospheric and symphonic vibe that you'll hear. Overall, I'd like to say that this is a very tasteful album, and even with particular things that some bands would take too far, such as with guitar solos, I really feel that the band did tastefully and fit well into their concept. In addition to that, the band uses just the right amount of technicality with their music, and never feels like they're trying to be technical for the sake of being technical. The last thing I'd like to say is that I really feel like the band sort of walks the fine line between music and concept very well here. A lot of bands do fall into the pitfalls of either making their concept, second fiddle to the actual music on the album, or making their concept being overwhelming and overbearing and washing out the actual musical ability and enjoyability of the songs. But on this album, I feel there's an almost perfect balance between the concept and the music. And I really do feel like the way the vocals are presented helps build that on top of the way the keywords are built into the song structures. Overall, I really have no complaints with this album whatsoever. This is quite an underrated album, though I do think this is one of the more popular things I have reviewed. I do believe XDAO is working on their second album to be released this August called Caligula, and I do recommend that you check it out if you do enjoy this album as well. This is a band that I think will become more and more popular over time, and they deserve every purchase that people make towards their album sales. Thanks a lot for watching this video, and goodbye.